You're listening to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor, powered by bbbgive.org. Here we explore the motivations that form the basis of giving and service. We inspire generosity and celebrate the transformative effects that giving and service have on the human spirit and on community. The conversations featured on the podcast also uncover giving strategies that educate and provide tools to help listeners make impactful gifts of both their time and money. We hope you enjoy this episode.
This is the Heart of Giving podcast, powered by bbbgive.org. Give.org is the nation's standards-based charity evaluator, and it's your one-stop source for information on giving and reports on the most asked about charities. I'm Art Taylor. You know, the issue of homelessness in our country remains one that we have to pay a lot of attention to. And it's not simply the urban areas that we think most frequently of. It's happening in places where we don't often in urban areas think that it's happening. In particular, we're going to talk to someone who's working in, believe it or not, Boise, Idaho, and the surrounding community to learn more about how it's managing homelessness in that state. And so I'm here today with Bill Roscoe, who is the president of the Boise Rescue Mission. And he's going to tell us a lot about what's going on there. Bill, welcome to the Heart of Giving podcast.
Thank you very much, Art. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
So, Bill, first, if we could, let's talk for a bit about the nature of the problem in Boise, because I'm sure that many of our listeners would not automatically assume that there's a huge homeless problem in that area. Now, I can tell you, I remember about 5 or 7 years ago, I did a talk to a group of charitable organizations in Boise and had a chance to learn quite a bit about the state. And one of the things I learned was that it's not simply about agriculture, which a lot of people think of Idaho, they think about potatoes and agriculture. It's not simply about mining, because that was also a highly thought of place for mining, but it's also now about tech. And as a result of that, and chips, right? And so people are coming to the area. At one point is one of the fastest growing states in our country because of that, and may still be. And also its diversity is growing quite rapidly too. It's becoming one of the most diverse places in our country. So what we may have thought of as a pretty bucolic state is rapidly becoming something different. And I would ask you to talk a bit about that, but also to share how that might be influencing or not the impact of some of the challenges that other major cities are seeing.
Well, you're hitting all of the points there, Art, that are very, very true and still going on, still a very fast-growing state. Everywhere we look around here, we see new construction going on, and those potato fields are becoming subdivisions, and sugar beet fields likewise. There's a lot of growth here, and whenever you have a lot of growth, you're going to have related issues to that growth. A lot of people come to Idaho because we also have a huge opportunity for work here. Pretty much every business in town has a sign out, and they're advertising everywhere they can, including the Boise Rescue Mission, trying to hire people. So people are coming here looking for jobs, but sometimes people are leaving one situation, looking for a new situation, looking for a step up in life. But when they get there, they find out that the issues and problems that they might have had wherever they're coming from are following them here. And so some of those people are going to become homeless, and we see some newcomers in our shelter numbers all the time. We're also sort of a melting pot for a variety of immigrants and refugees and people leaving other countries. In fact, this rescue mission partnered with a group of Ukrainians uh, about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe now, who were looking for help to provide shelter for Ukrainian refugees. And we offered a facility to them, one of our rescue mission shelters that was pretty much empty at the time. And they did house Ukrainian refugees and set up their operations there to help those people who were resettling to Idaho to have a place to land. In fact, it was very successful. Over 600 families in 2 years went through the process with these folks to resettle in Idaho. So we do see a lot of new people, and we see a variety of people from all over the United States, primarily from the Northwest and the West Coast, coming to Boise, coming to the Treasure Valley. And with that, we're going to see some number of those people fall into trouble and need the safety net that the rescue mission provides. We're very busy here now, as we have been through the last 66 years, as we were established in 1958. And we enjoy what we do in that we're Christians. We love to share our gospel message with people. And with that, our goal is to help people to recover from homelessness. We don't want to be a place that people come to and stay forever. We want them to come here and use the resources that we make available and then move out of homelessness and back into independent living. So that's always our goal, along with sharing our faith.
Yeah. Well, as I was saying before, we kind of track what's going on in homelessness a little bit. And it does appear that the numbers are growing. And that could be for a variety of reasons, one of which has to do with the challenges that people have earning enough money to actually pay their rent or to actually have a mortgage or own a house. And also just the sheer numbers representing not enough places for people to live, and certainly not enough low income housing. And so we have this combination of forces that seem to be influencing what happens to people's ability to have a home. And of course, there have always been other issues that people are dealing with, whether it be drug abuse, alcohol abuse, the problems that people have with mental illness and other problems. And so, we're going to need to find new ways of addressing this problem if we're going to see a decline in the numbers. What are you seeing that we need to do differently? And we're going to talk about your work, and you're probably doing some of those things. But what's not working, and what are you seeing that you're doing that may be working at this point?
Well, I really believe that a lot of the effort to, quote, end homelessness, end quote, is really not fruitful at all. And if you look at major cities in the United States, and you look at the number of dollars that those municipalities, governments have poured into solving the problem of homelessness, you find almost in every single case that as much money as is being spent has not caused the number of homeless people to decline. In fact, in many cases, most cases, the number of homeless people in those communities has increased. And I think that has to tell us that it's not just pouring money into programs that's going to help make a difference or make a dent in the homeless population. And I believe that what we need to see is more emphasis on access to recovery programs, because the largest number of homeless people in some communities, it's 80% of the homeless population, are chemically dependent or alcoholic, and usually it's suffering with an untreated mental illness. So as we look at that, just that statistic, we ought to be saying to ourselves that what we need here are more treatment programs and more access to treatment programs for people who have the untreated mental illness or have a dependency on alcohol or other drugs. And so that's really the focus of this rescue mission, and has been for the 23 years that I've been here and beyond that, to provide really legitimate recovery programs for those folks who are suffering with these illnesses, whether it be mental illness or chemical dependency, alcoholism, so that they can find their way out of that, because that's going to be the first step in their becoming productive again, self-sufficient. So we do focus a lot of our resources on the recovery programs that we offer. And at the same time, we're seeing more and more elderly people in our guest service category, our homeless category of people. Elderly people who have lived in a place and paid their rent. Typically, they're renters. They've been paying their rent and they've been living there, and suddenly the rent goes up by 35-40% or more, with a 30 or 60-day notice of that rental increase happening. And these folks find themselves suddenly not being able to afford where they live and not having the resources to move from one place to another, because rents around them and rents where they might move to are just as high as what their rent has gone up to. So we've had as many as 55 people in our shelter beds who were over 65 years old, and the majority of them were over 70 years old.
Wow.
And these people have never been homeless. Most of them obviously aren't in the workforce anymore, and they've been living on a small pension and or social security payment. But when the rents go up as much as they have in this valley in the last 5 years, they just can't afford to live there anymore. And they're suddenly finding themselves displaced. And that connects to another problem, which is the disconnectedness of people. It used to be, as I was a young man growing up, if grandma needed a place to go, she came home, went to one of the kids' homes and had a place to stay there and be cared for and loved. But families are so dispersed today. We've got, you live in Boise and your children live in New York, or your nearest relatives live in New Mexico or California, and they're disconnected. And so people don't feel that strong family obligation to help one another anymore. And we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing an increase like we haven't ever seen in this valley. And so we're looking at, that demographic, because serving someone who's 75 years old in a homeless shelter that traditionally and mostly is serving people who are much younger, and mostly people who have been homeless and displaced and carry all of the trauma and all of the effects of homelessness with them, is a very difficult situation. So we're trying to move the elderly people into a particular place in the dorm, and we've opened up our recovery lodge. We have a shelter that we call the Recovery Lodge, which was built and specifically for homeless people who were needing medical respite. But at the same time, we have these seniors some of whom have dementia. We've had diagnosed Alzheimer patients in our shelters. We're moving some of those people, those most critical needs people, into the Recovery Lodge, because it is a much smaller, quieter shelter. And because of the smaller numbers of people in shelter, the staff shelter ratio is much better. And we can pay more attention to those folks and case manage those people, so that we can help them to move from homelessness into an assisted living or an independent living facility once those beds become available.
So I want to ask you a few questions about how you operate. The first one is to just give me some idea of the various elements and types of services that you offer through your program, and then the populations of people you serve. So you talked a bit about the older folk, but there's also, I guess, a substance abuse group that would need additional types of services than maybe some of the older people who are suffering potentially with dementia. And then younger families who maybe they just need a minute to find a place to get a job and get on their feet. But tell me about the types of services that you're providing, so that the audience can get some idea of what we're talking about.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, the elderly people and the work that we're doing with them, the majority of the people at the rescue mission today are going to be between 25 and 50 years old. That's the general population on average.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, most of them are going to need help with substance abuse and or mental health care.
Mm-hmm.
So we incorporated a substance abuse recovery program into the rescue mission when I got here, with very intention, with an intention to provide a legitimate recovery program for homeless people that are staying at our shelter. And it includes some great recovery curriculum. A lot of the mainstream recovery curriculum that you would hear about and use, we would be using here, such as Staying Sober, which is a book by a great clinician named Terry Gorski. We also use a Bible-based recovery curriculum that's called the Genesis Process, because we are Christians and we make no bones about that.
Yeah.
But the Genesis Process is a great curriculum for recovery. But we also include curriculum that deals with life skills, with parenting, with knowing good relationships from bad relationships, and those kinds of things, because domestic violence is another cause of homelessness.
Yeah.
So we teach all of those things in our recovery program, but at the same time, case managers in our facilities are trained in these curriculum. And so if there's someone, say, who's in the veterans program, who's a homeless veteran, that same kind of teaching and training is available to them while they're a member of the Veterans Transitional Living Program. Pardon me. We also have really emphasized ministry to children that stay with us, because we have a large number of kids with us every single day. In fact, this last week, when my census count came to me from my staff, we had 26 children staying in our men's and women's shelter. Wow. and a couple in the men's shelter where we have single dads with kids. So we really focus on academics for those children, but life skills to them as well, because many of our children, maybe most of our children, haven't lived in what we would consider to be a normal, ordinary household, with parents, or at least with one parent who's focused and dedicated to caring for the kids. And so our kids come to us with a lot of trauma, a lot of disruption in their lives, bouncing around from place to place. And so we really spend a lot of time doing life skills kind of training with the children and their moms. We also have a contract with a local counseling agency who focus on children. And almost every one of our children goes through at least an intake with that group, so that the clinicians on that side can tell us, this child looks like it, they should have this kind of therapy or treatment, and we can then proceed to provide that for those kids. And the good news is the kids are so resilient, it's absolutely amazing. Even those that have been severely traumatized, in short order, those children start to really respond to treatment and respond to the continuity of people in their lives, a place to live that's the same when they come home from school and get dropped off by the bus. Everything's the way it was when they left in the morning, which is a new thing for a lot of those kids.
Yeah.
So children's programs, academics are a part of that. And we also have academics for adults, because again, a lot of the adults staying in our shelters, due to their own homelessness, maybe they're second, third generational homeless kids. They didn't go to school. They didn't get past high school. They don't have a high school diploma. On the other hand, we do have college graduates in the shelter as well, but the majority are not.
No.
So we have academics for adults, and they can complete their GEDs while they're in our program. And many of them then go on to secondary education. We have had specific funding given for college tuitions and college academic costs. So we have a lot of people going to college on any given day. Trade schools, too. We have a wonderful program here called College of Western Idaho, which is really a trade school, junior college kind of environment. And they have some really great opportunity in the building trades, automotive trades, and a lot of our people are interested in those and take advantage of those, and we can help them. We can facilitate their enrollment, and we can help them with funding for tuition and tools and things they need, and see those people really gain a skill that's going to provide for them from now on.
Well, good luck
other
with
than
them
that,
if they can do anything with automotive, because I look under the hood of my car. In fact, one of my cars said, "Don't even open it."
right? One of my cars, you open the hood and all you see is this huge covers, a huge cover, and I don't have a clue what's under there
Right.
anymore.
Well, good luck to them. But the
Yeah.
point is, there are opportunities for them in your communities
Mhm.
where they can actually earn a living if they can put it together. And it's great that you've combined not only the sheltering of them, but the programming around education and getting well, right? So
Hmm.
that they can actually take advantage of the opportunities. What are some of the success stories that you've seen in your program that bring you a lot of joy, I'm sure?
Well, the good news is there are a lot of those. Of course, I've been doing this a long time, so I have a lot of them.
How long have you been doing it?
Well,
Tell
I
our audience.
started 33 years ago. I started working at the Rescue Mission in Santa Rosa, California. And here I am today in Boise, Idaho. Made a stop in Denver along the way, learned a lot from the Denver Rescue Mission Ministry. So 33 years, and I've known hundreds and hundreds of people by now, and I can tell success stories, and I'm happy to do that. And unfortunately, I have other stories that aren't so great. But
Yeah.
on the wall in front of me that you can't see is a picture of a young man. Well, he was a young man then, who I met when I first started in rescue ministry, probably about 1992 or three. And this young guy had been through every shelter and every recovery program in the East Bay, Oakland, Richmond, California. And he went back after getting out of prison again. And the program director called me and said he had this fellow wanting to get back in the program, but they just didn't see any point to trying to run him through their program again. He'd been there 3 or 4 times and failed. And he asked me if we would accept him, and we did. And he came up to Santa Rosa and joined our program. And the first month or so, he was rather obnoxious and rude. And, he was doing his time to avoid making probation and parole unhappy with him. But somewhere in that first month or so, he really reestablished his own faith in God. And I remember him coming to my office and telling me that he'd gone to church on Sunday, and he really felt like it was time to turn his life around and wanted to do that. So we, of course, were happy to hear that, and we made the way for him to continue in the program. And he was the first one of my program people who went on to junior college. He got his associate's degree at the junior college in Santa Rosa, and then he went on to Chico State University, where he got his bachelor's degree. And by the time he was at Chico, I had moved up to be the director of the rescue mission in Redding, and he was working for me part time because he wanted to continue in school and did. And he got his bachelor's degree. And before he graduated, he was working at the county mental health agency as an outreach worker to mentally ill homeless people. And I'm so proud of him. He was working on his master's degree when he passed away from cancer. And this is like 25 years after I met him. But he was just a wonderful example of how change can happen in the lives of people. And then there's others. For example, here in Boise, I know a woman who came into our program who was homeless and had an encounter with law enforcement because of some let's just say some misdemeanor violations. And she ended up going to college here at Boise State University. And she earned 2 bachelor's degrees, one in criminal justice and one in psychology. And she went to work for one of the county sheriff agencies and worked there for a bit, and then made a transfer over to the Boise Police Department, where she worked for a long time, and then ended up in the detective division there, working with victims of children who were victims of crime, and was just a wonderful part of the cadre there at the police department. And we've had guys go into the construction world. I've got a good friend who graduated from our program about 7 or 8 years ago, who is today a leading construction superintendent here in the Valley, has a great job with a really top flight organization. and comes to all of our events and is always willing to share his story, which I really appreciate, so that people can hear from him firsthand how his life changed because he showed up at the rescue mission moving out of a Connex. He was living in a steel Connex in the middle of winter, which are pretty severe here in the valley. And he came to the mission because he was just freezing to death. And boom, his whole life has turned around. He's married, really has a reunion with his kids from his first marriage, doing great. And we're awful proud of him. But at the same time, about 25% of my workforce right here, right now, are graduates of our program. I think our entire food service staff, except for one, is our program graduates, because almost all of our people in the recovery program are going to get their food handler card and help in the kitchen, because we always need help there. So we've got the food service people. I have at least 4 or 5 case managers or resident assistants who are also graduates of our program. And that's especially helpful because sometimes they encounter people that they knew back in the day when they were on the street. And when those people have an encounter with one of our graduates who's now serving on staff, it makes a powerful impression that, hey, this guy changed his life. This woman looks different. Maybe I could change. Maybe I can have a life and live a productive life again. So we're really glad to have those people. And they're great employees. All of them are great employees. And we enjoy having them on the staff.
Well, that's wonderful, because I was going to ask you about the challenge you might or may not have just getting people to work in the program. And it looks like you have a good source just from people who've gone through it. So that's really nice to hear.
Well, in a way, I'm kind of selfish. I wish they all came to work for me because I'm shorthanded. But I'm happy to see them move on. But you're right. Working here is challenging. We, we meet people much like the police. We meet them on some of the worst days of their lives when they come through our doors. And at the same time, just like the police, we can really offer some good, tangible help from time to time, and see people make a big change. I'm shorthanded by probably 15 staff members right now, and it's mostly in those frontline services, because day in and day out, when you're encountering the homeless crew that come in at mealtime and then come in the evening time to check in for a bed, there's some real challenging encounters there. The good news is that God has been very good to us, and we've been really, really protected from violence, even graffiti and damage to buildings and things like that. We don't see a lot of that at all, but it's always on the edge. There are people who are persistently mentally ill, and they're homeless, and they come to us as that place of refuge. And sometimes they have an episode, a mental breakdown, and we have problems with people acting out, which is another good reason why we started our own in-house mental health care program, because we have people on call. And when we have an episode like that, rather than call 911 and get the police involved, we can call one of our counselors who will rush over to the scene and help us to have a peaceful intervention, if you will, so that someone can go to bed instead of going to jail. Yeah. As you know, I'm sure you would know that the largest mental health facility in most counties is the county jail. Yeah. And that's just a tragic fact of life that we really need to work on.
Sure. Well, we're probably getting to the end of our interview, but I wanted to offer you a chance to just share with our audience how they can be helpful.
Thank you. People in the valley here, I want to say to the people in the valley, that especially the newcomers, that when you drive through the Treasure Valley, Boise, Meridian, Nampa, Idaho, you don't see homeless camps. You don't see a lot of people flying the sign, "I'll work for food," or "homeless and please help." You don't see that, because 300 to 500 homeless people are staying at the Boise Rescue Mission right now.
Wow.
And we need your help to get that job done. We don't take any government funding. So we need people who will financially support us, and we need people who have skills and gifts and talents and need a place to share those we are the place. Please call us, because you can find your place to serve right here, working with people who are really on the way up out of homelessness and despair. And you can be an encouragement and a minister to them. And we have job openings across the board. You can check our website, boiserm.org. And there's a place there that says get involved. Click that button, and you'll see volunteer opportunities as well as opportunities to come onto the staff, come onto the team, and serve with us. We need prayer. We need prayer every day. Pray for us.
Well, Bill, I want to thank you for joining me today. You've been listening to Bill Roscoe, who is the president of the Boise Rescue Mission, and they're doing terrific work in that region to help people get on track. And if you can help, I'm sure they would appreciate it. Now, to all of you who are listening to our podcast for the first time, the Heart of Giving podcast is a weekly show, and we come out every Tuesday. So I hope you will subscribe. If you want to support the Wise Giving Alliance, you can do that by going to give.org and make a donation there, and we would put it to great use. Thank you for listening, and I hope we'll see you back here next week.
You've just listened to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor. Be sure to tune in next time for a brand new episode. To listen to our other interviews, visit heartgiving.podbean.com. That's heartgiving.podbean.com. Subscribe to our show on major podcast platforms. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are the views and opinions of the guests, not those of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance or program affiliates. This podcast is for information and educational purposes only and is copyrighted with all rights reserved. This podcast is protected by Podbean's terms of service.